Welcome to another episode of Keeping It Realty with Marc and Brian. I want to thank you for tuning in, watching, or if you're on the audio version, thank you for listening. And hopefully we can make your commute or even doing laundry much more entertaining. So
my goal is to make your laundry more entertaining.
That should be our motto. That should be our, making your laundry a better experience.
Exactly. Yeah. That'd be a great tagline.
We're such realtors for saying that. Thank you to East Brother Beer Company for being our show sponsor. Awesome beer. Today's beer tasting is a little bit different than what we've tried in the past. I think do you remember what we tried on the first episode?
We had a Pilsner and we had
Pilsner, and then
oatmeal.
We had the IPA, the second one. And then now we have a red lager. So this is what we have poured. So again, great, awesome beer. If you haven't checked out East Brother Beer Company, go check them out. They're in Point Richmond on Canal Boulevard. Great location. So we've got a great show and a lot of info and topics to really cover. So let's jump right into it. The very first thing we want to talk about is Zillow 2.0. So recently Zillow announced that they want to continue expanding their business. They're a huge company, publicly traded, and one of the announcements that they made is they're on a mission now to raise capital and start purchasing homes up to 5,000 homes per month. And
it's quite an ambitious feat.
Yeah, and they also want to do 3,000 loans per year.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Brian, the question is, are they going to be successful, and why are they trying to do this? Because Zillow has Zillow Offers out right now, which is kind of comparable to Open Doors and even Redfin's platform. So how's this going to turn out for Zillow?
Well, there's, if I could predict exactly what happened, I'd be a much richer man. However, there's a lot of different speculative things that go into place whether or not this will be a successful venture. A big part of the reason why they want to go in this direction is from what I understand, they're losing sales from their typical business model, which is, as most of you know, you go on a Zillow, you get a Zestimate, they give you this overinflated valuation for your home, and then usually that's a good sign of you showing an interest in selling your home. So those leads that they generate from people interested in possibly selling their home, they sell to realtors like myself or my agents. Various models out there like Realtor.com, Trulia, or Zillow use these types of models that advertise to the consumer and then in turn sell the leads back to the realtors who, in turn contact those specific buyers or sellers.
And personally, I hate that kind of business model because it might work for a certain amount of time, but eventually it dies off because the thing that we're seeing right now is a lot of real estate agents are figuring out and discovering that these leads are not always the best leads.
Correct,
and they're spending a lot of money because it's very expensive. And it's kind of numbing when I get a call every single week from a Zillow representative saying, hey, someone just dropped out of your zip code and we've got a special deal for you.
Yeah, no, it's quite interesting. And actually, I actually use Realtor.com. I have used Zillow in the past. Other agents in my office use Zillow. So I don't like it primarily because the valuations are so inflated that it gives the seller lead an inflated price in their mind. So by the time you call them, you're dealing with bringing their valuation of their property back down to reality. So with the advent of them possibly going out and buying homes, they want to be able to control the market. From what I understand, they're either not syndicating, but they're actually raising money on Wall Street in an IPO to be able to raise capital to buy up several homes.
Basically do what Open Door does in buying a property where a seller can enter their requested price or request an offer. They get an offer within 24 hours and sell it to Zillow directly. Now, it's going to be at a discount.
Right. And in fact, so segueing off of what Marc's discount is, from what I understand, their business model will be that when I, as a seller, decide to log on to their site to tell, to go, I'm interested in selling my home, and then they tell me what they think it's worth, they will in turn have up to 10 days to buy my home, and they will probably buy it at a discount equal to the amount you would normally pay in a real estate commission. My big thing first about that is they better get their valuations down on that property much better, because right now they give these overinflated values for property. And so if they're buying property at an overinvaluated price based on their existing algorithm, well, then, that creates a problem for them, because when they go to resell it to make that profit margin that they would have normally made up as the realtor, then, they're not going to move these properties for a profit greater than what they bought it from the homeowner. So that's my first big concern.
And if they drop these estimates into a more realistic pricing algorithm, then you may discourage a lot of homeowners, because now they may not want to sell at those prices.
That's correct. And so it really depends too on the timing of the market, right? There's a lot of movement right now to automate the entire real estate buying system, to kind of remove realtors from the buying experience, mainly because they want to automate it the way the travel industry has gone. Now, that's probably something that could be done with single family. You don't see it as prevalent on analysis of apartment buildings and things of this nature. But this is kind of the next step forward, where they actually own the inventory. Now, depending on the market, that could be done very easily, but if the market is very slow, then you do need that human touch. Because for those of you who've ever been through a real estate transaction, there's so many moving components that most of the time, as a realtor, you're playing, marriage counselor to, legal analyst to accountant and things of this nature. So it's not a super simple process, which is what they want to be able to do and streamline and speed up.
Yeah, in short, I don't think Zillow will be able to pull this off. They're literally just trying to figure out how they can generate additional revenues, because their current model is kind of on a losing streak right now. So next topic is cryptocurrency in real estate. So this kind of made news, I want to say about 2 years ago, when the very first real estate properties sold using Bitcoin. And I believe that maybe only 1 or 2 properties sold using Bitcoin. And I haven't heard much about it until recently. Some new technologies coming out about using cryptocurrency in order to do Airbnb transactions, or even possible landlord to tenant rent payment exchanges. So the big question is cryptocurrency going to provide any kind of value to real estate transactions?
Well, right now, in my opinion, it's a little too early to tell, primarily because cryptocurrency is such a volatile topic and the valuation of it is so erratic. It's actually not that difficult to go out and create your own cryptocurrency, so it really depends upon which cryptocurrency and the stability of that cryptocurrency that people are willing to accept as legal tender or value for exchange of their real estate. And then also, there's definite advantages to it, but it really depends upon who's willing to accept that.
And it's still early on, but we're starting to see JP Morgan Chase announce their first cryptocurrency. Now, that's going to be used mainly in-house and mainly within the banking industry that they control. But we're seeing banks starting to really look at cryptocurrency as a solution to cutting out the middleman in a lot of different transactions. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that develops, because eventually, I think one day, as banks start unleashing their own cryptocurrency, tenants, landlords, or Airbnb, VRBO transactions.
And it all comes down exactly to that. It's to really the popular demand. If people are willing to accept of a certain value to something. For example, the only reason our dollar is worth what it is because of the faith of the American people in that piece of paper and the backing that goes behind it, and then also the willingness of everybody to use that as a common exchange. Whereas you have cryptocurrency, when you receive it, you have to actually be an individual technologically advanced enough to be able to receive it and not get it stolen from your account. Which actually I guess is pretty prevalent. So you have to have that. You have to have a lot of different infrastructure and channels and an understanding, and then also be able to trade it with somebody for another set of goods who's willing to accept that cryptocurrency. And there's actually various ones out there. So
yeah, and right now, if you're looking for some type of digital, it's not really digital currency, but some kind of digital transaction to make collection of rent payments easy. There is the Cash App, there is Venmo, there's PayPal, there's a few out there already, but they focus on doing debit card to debit card, or debit card to bank account, or bank account to bank account. Cryptocurrency would be a little bit different, but that blockchain technology would really be useful. In fact, so many industries are looking at blockchain technology to basically, and in the context of real estate, blockchain technology would be able to, I think, eliminate the need for even title reports on properties, because everything would be documented, recorded, spread out amongst multiple servers. There would be no way to hack it, and you would have a clean title and a clean history on title every time.
And just to kind of quickly simplify blockchain, let's see if I can do that in like 30 seconds. Blockchain is just a program that allows a verification of one exchange to another, and the validity of that individual to exchange it, right? So in the context of title insurance and title companies existed because in the past when I'd want to go buy a land from somebody, and the only thing I needed was this piece of paper called a deed. It was very easy for the real owner of a property to be off traveling somewhere, and then their horrible son, and we'll use Marc here as that example, to sell that property to somebody else and impersonate himself as the owner of the property. And then lo and behold, the real owner comes back, finds somebody owning or living on their property, and then, disputes arise. And this was why title insurance occurred. So when you take that in the context of blockchain, and then being able to verify that the individual who exchange the money, or for that matter, exchange the title, then you begin to, well, theoretically eliminate the additional forms of verification needed, which is what we kind of have in our current industry today and how the industry has evolved.
I think one of the problems with the digital currency or cryptocurrency is that look at how volatile Bitcoin was and how Bitcoin reached almost 20,000 and then just crashed. And I don't know where it's at right now, but I want to say it's like 3, 4, 5,000 mark right now, the valuation. So imagine accepting a rent payment at 20,000 and then
suddenly that valuation goes down to nothing, so you can't buy anything but a stick of gum with it.
Exactly. So now your rent payment of $1,900 is worth $19.
Yeah. So we can go on and on. Right now it's all very, very theoretical. Only time will tell.
So next topic is a rent gouging bill. So we're all aware in California there is a housing market. Prices for single family homes to purchase or even rental properties have skyrocketed. So the one thing that was recently announced in Oregon is that they want to put a statewide cap, and I believe they're going to vote on this here fairly soon, but a statewide cap on rent prices. So essentially rent control, and they want to make it somewhere in the 7 to 10% range.
Right.
Like that's the max limit.
To jump in there, this whole proposal of rent gouging law is kind of in lieu of rent control, whereas rent control would be a lot more stringent and encumbering on the rights and demands of landlords as well as tenants. A rent gouging law, it seems a little bit more that happy balance or medium, just from what I've been able to read of it so far. As Marc brought out, it's about a 7 to 10% rental increase cap, as opposed to like a 2% or a 3% rental increase cap that's imposed with rent control and with all these other laws like a just cause and things of this nature for eviction.
And many people don't know that right now in California, we already have a 10% cap limit for rent increases. And the reason why is because due to the various wildfires that we've had in the last few years, about 2 years ago, Governor Brown issued a state of emergency. Well, once a state of emergency is issued by a governor or even a sitting president like Trump with a national state of emergency, that kicks in the price gouging laws in California. What that says is every industry, including rental housing, is capped at 10% increases. So if you're renting a property for $2,000, the most you can increase it is by $200, the 10%. And that's within any 12-month period. So that already exists. Many people don't know that, and it's been like that for the last almost 2 years.
The big difference right now is that moratorium is due to the fact that we have a lot of natural disasters, so that it does have a set time limit and will eventually go away, where the rent gouging law would be permanent.
Which is set to go away on May 31st of 2019. Once that disappears, now in California, as long as you're outside of a rent control jurisdiction, you would be able to raise your rents above 10% with a 60-day notice. And basically, business just goes back to normal. But out of all the clients I've spoken to where they want us to raise the rents on the properties we manage, when we have that discussion and we tell them, hey, the most you can raise rents is by 10%. I haven't had one single owner upset with that law, with that rule. And in fact, I've had some that say, no, I just want to raise it 3%, 5%, 7%, something reasonable instead of even the 10% max they can do. So I think that 10%, what Oregon's proposing, that is a happy median.
Yeah, yeah. I would concur with that whole idea. It's a nice happy medium between what the people who want rent control want and what the landlords want. And just to kind of put things in perspective, there's a thing called loss to lease, and that's the difference between what fair market rent should be and what you're actually getting. And in places like Berkeley or Oakland or San Francisco, where you do have rent control, where the landlord is capped at an average of 2.8 or 3.10% per year, you'll have a huge disparity or loss to lease between what they're actually getting and what the market rent is. And so you'll have a rent difference of upwards of 26, 30%, 40% sometimes. And so in prior years before rent control occurred, you would be able to jump all the way to that higher number, whatever a fair market would be if there was no rent control, provided that the tenant decide to stay. Now, the tenant always has the right to move out, and the landlord in prior markets where these laws didn't exist would do so under the risk that they'd have to put somebody new in. But if you're a savvy landlord and you know that there's a huge demand, you have a large waiting list, they would be willing to make those large increases because it was not against the law. Now, as Marc brought out, a lot of landlords, they're just not conscientiously willing to go above 10% most of the time because they would feel just bad about doing so, even though they might have the right to do so in times when there's no moratorium or there's no national emergency.
Well, I tell people all the time that many landlords were tenants at some point. Yes. They understand how it is. They've experienced it themselves. And many landlords, especially the small mom and pop landlords, they might have one rental, two rentals, and they depend on that money to survive every month because they themselves have bills. And so if you raise the rent too aggressively and the tenant leaves, now you have no income coming in, and now they're forking over a lot of money to simply keep the properties, and that's not something most landlords want.
And just to close that quickly, the main issue is it's all a big mathematical equation. If you can cover your expenses and make a decent profit, defined as anywhere from 6 to 7%, return on your money, which is not a huge chunk of change, then most landlords are willing to do that. It's in cases like with rent control where suddenly they're having to literally fork money out of their pocket because they don't even have enough money to cover property tax increases or utilities going up, because we all know when East Bay Mud raises the water, they never bring it back down. But anyways, I think it would strike a nice happy balance.
Okay, so the next topic is presidential housing plans. So we have a few Democratic candidates. We have Kamala Harris, we have Cory Booker, and Elizabeth Warren, and they're each proposing, they're trying to figure out a way to attack housing, and this is on a national level, and they each have somewhat of a similar proposal. Kamala Harris is proposing the Rent Relief Act, which could cost up to $94 billion per year. They assume 7.4 million people will be pulled out of poverty. And basically what this plan would do is provide credits when your rent exceeds 30% of your income. Cory Booker has a similar one that would cost about $134 billion per year, which would pull 9.4 million Americans out of poverty. And this would give you a credit difference between the 30% income and your rent that's being paid. So you do collect a little bit more rent credit. Now, Elizabeth Warren is doing something a little bit different in that instead of providing some kind of rent credit, she's trying to attack the housing supply and demand issue. So basically what she wants to do is spend up to $50 billion a year, and instead of providing rent credits, she wants to tried to reduce rents 10% nationwide by increasing the supply, essentially giving cities and counties and various different jurisdictions credits and grants to build more housing. So she's attacking it from supply and demand. Harris and Booker are attacking it from providing rent credits. Brian, what's your take on this?
My whole thing is just to create more supply. As I've gone through all the different proposals that each of these candidates have had, I found many pros and many cons in either one of them. But the one that I'd have to gravitate to the most is the one that would make it easier for more housing to be created. One thing that I was looking for in all their proposals was something that might allow developers to not get gouged by the cities themselves. So case in point, a big deterrent to being able to build is that many cities are adding on additional fees, or impact fees is what they call them, to developers who want to be able to exceed the number of units that are normally allocated for a parcel or a piece of land. So case in point, if I want to build an apartment complex and the most that I could build there is, say, 20 units, but I'm proposing a plan that's a lot more, that will create a higher density to maybe allow me to go to 40 or maybe 60 units, after a certain point, I'm going to have to pay an additional $10,000 to $12,000 per unit that they allow me to go, which really cuts into the bottom line, and then also begins to diminish the whole idea of being able to add more units, which answers the whole problem of the supply. And so, in addition to what I saw missing from a lot of these different proposals was something that would allow the cities to be able to make it. To be able to reduce the amount of impact fees that they're really taking in, to actually use those fees towards actually building a better or more units, which would probably help the whole housing crisis more than collecting fees from developers who are supposedly, greedy and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, one of the issues I see with Harris and Booker's proposals here for housing fixes is that we've already had a lot of economists come out and analyze Kamala Harris's plan when she first announced it several months ago. And they're not the first politician to propose this kind of plan. There's been prior politicians that have proposed something very similar. The problem is, and there's plenty of studies that show it, is that what happens is these credits eventually make their way to the landlord. And so the landlords will make more money because now you have tenants that are getting a rent credit. Now they're able to afford more housing. And so what they plan to do is then, or what the average renter will do is go and get something a little bit more expensive, right? And then before you know it, every landlord's raising their prices because they know tenants can afford it. And so because tenants can afford it, they're paying these higher prices. So these rent credits are simply going to filter through right to a landlord, and the landlord's going to make more money.
Well, and that was why when I looked at the overall plan, my main focus and what I was looking at that was lacking was something that would allow more units to be able to be made. Because just addressing your simple point there, if everybody's raising their rents, the main reason you're able to do that is because the supply is going down. And so regardless of how much additional money or credits someone might be able to bring to the table to give to the landlord to pay rent, at the end of the day, if there's more units to offset that, the prices will still stay lower. That's a big issue with our urban infill areas, is just they're so impacted. And then you have all these issues with traffic demand. So you have people building more housing further away, so they need more cars, and it makes our freeways that much more congested. Whereas if you begin to just make it so much easier to live within the cities where the jobs are, then not only would our traffic begin to slow down because you wouldn't need cars, but you'd also begin to have more supply, therefore reducing the actual cost of it.
Okay, so now we get to the property analysis. So Brian, we're going to analyze a building in Oakland. You said it's 7 units. So let's get into this. What are we analyzing here?
So we're looking at a 7-unit building in Oakland. It's currently on the market. And the property is comprised of 7 2-bedroom, 1-bath units. Now, the property advertises itself as a 6.75 cap rate, which is actually really, really good because, as I've mentioned in many prior shows, so long as a landlord is in a position to be able to buy at a 5.5 to 6 cap, but has a clear view in sight of being able to, just through regular rental increases that would go 5 to 10% a year, right? Nothing greater than 10%. And they can begin to increase their cap rate or their return from a 5.5 to a 6.5 or a 7, then these are good investments. Now, this one says very specifically that it's at a 6.75 cap. Now, I've only gone through a very cursory analysis of this property. And one of the things that I began to look at after I pulled the current property taxes, looked at the ad valorem rate, its current assessments and bonds, and began to create what I believe would be the regular fixed expenses.
Now, real quick, sorry to interrupt, but I think a lot of people don't know how to look up the current taxes and any bonds and assessments. And I think we should just kind of clarify that.
Yeah, in fact, we should probably have just another segment on our class next time.
But just to keep it short, if you go to the county's website,
and it's different for each county, Contra Costa, Alameda, Solano,
you want to go to the county's tax assessor's website or the tax collector. Some counties will have it a little bit different setup, but you basically want to, let's say this property is in Oakland, so it's Alameda County. If you just go into Google and type in Alameda County tax collector bill lookup, that will usually link you to the correct page on the first or second link. You go there, type in the property address or the APN number if you have it, and then you'll be able to pull up a copy of the bill to get these numbers.
Now, going off of that, the main reason why I was focusing on that is because I wanted to, there was a lot of unknowns about this property, and there's still a couple of questions. And so I'll kind of bring these out to you because these are all different things that, as an investor, you want to be able to immediately know. And if you don't know, you want to know what you need to ask. And so the property advertised itself as a 6.75 cap rate. Now, when I did my own evaluation of expenses, the actual cap rate based on its purchase price is closer to 4.28. Now, there's a huge difference between 4.28 and 6.75. So I'm just kind of giving the realtor the benefit of the doubt, and I'm looking at it, and maybe he's going off of what the projected rents would be or what fair market rents would be. Because when I look at the actual rents that are displayed in CoStar, for example, the building itself only has an income of $8,547 a month or $102,000 a year. It's got an asking price of $1,385,000. And so when you run these new expenses based on that, and I'm running them at roughly 39% of the current income, then you're only getting a net operating income of roughly $59,000 a year over an asking price of $1,385,000, which is a 4.28% return, not a 6.75. The other big thing, a big red flag that came out was it advertised that the property did not have rent control. So this is something I have to investigate further because the property age was 1963. And for those of you who don't know, properties built after 1984 are ones that are exempt from rent control.
And they were advertising this building as non-rent control?
Yes, there's no rent control. So, again, I put in some calls and, was looking into it a little bit more just to vet out whether these claims were true or not. Now, if that was the case and you went right up to market rent, then the property could go to a 6.68 cap, right? Meaning you would begin to increase your net operating income. This is the income before you make a mortgage payment from $59,000 to $92,000. And if you superimpose $92,000 over a $1,385,000 purchase price, still using roughly those same expenses of 39% a year, then you're getting closer to a 6.68% return on your money. And so the property is worth further investigation. It is in Oakland, where the rents, the market rents are much higher because of its close proximity to jobs and things of this nature. The area itself, was marginal. It's a C-class neighborhood. But again, these are things you want to look for when you're looking at property to determine whether or not to take that next step to ask for more information. The property itself is.
Excuse me. Did the listing agent ever get back to you on that advertising the building as non-rent control?
They did, but it was information. The answer, I wasn't satisfied with the answer. So, like I said, I'll look into it myself a little bit more. In fact, I was going to ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah, that's just a huge red flag for me, because if the listing agent is advertising no rent control in a building that does have rent control, then they give you a very BS answer, something that isn't clear cut. Then that really brings into question everything else that they're advertising.
Well, at any point in time that you're looking at any type of real estate investment, you should always bring everything into some level of questioning and do your own underwriting. Never take at face value their expenses. There's certain rules of thumb, like if a property is newer, then you could probably run, and you're running it very efficiently, then you're maybe between 28 to 30% of your gross income or effective income as your expenses. But when you have a 1963 building, no real major renovations that I saw of note or capital improvements, you want to run it closer to 35, 38, 39, 40% of effective income towards expenses. And so when you do that, then the net operating income, of course, drops. And that's the main denominator that you're going to be using to determine what your actual return on your money is based on what you buy it for. So again, the property, it looks like it has a lot of potential, because in the event that, well, a couple of things. Here's a couple of other effects of cap rate. Is if you are buying something at a 6 cap, then the higher the cap, the lower the price. So if it advertises itself at a 6.75 cap, and we're going to just use the nice happy medium of 6, and you use the expenses that I use, then the building is only worth $988,000, because in order for me to make a 6% return with an income of only $59,000 a year, I have to buy it for $988,000, not $1,385,000, which is its asking price.
Now, I know one question that some people may have is, well, how do you determine the rents you can increase every single year? Now, for prior rent increases, City of Oakland has a really, really great calculator form that you can download right off their website. You input basically the base rent price, when you want to increase rent. They have a great calculator, and it tells you exactly.
And so I was just going to say, when I ask that question, I have my certain baseline expectations, but then I will more defer to someone like yourself who's got the expertise in specific areas and as to what you can actually raise the rent to. So just segueing off of what you said, the current rent being $8,547 from what was advertised a month, and I'm projecting that the rent should be closer to $11,623. You see a 26.471% loss to lease, right? So right off the bat, when you know that Oakland in general has rent control, and you can't exceed, I think it's 2.85 or 2.95 a year in rent control. Now, there are some times where you can go a little bit more if you can show that you've spent a certain amount in capital improvements. You can
There is a moratorium on that right now.
Right, yeah. But there is a moratorium, but Marc was alluding to certain calculations that allow you to get a little bit more than the 2.85 or 2.95.
So basically banking rents. So that's one thing where in the due diligence, you want to get copies of the lease agreements, but I find that many buyers will get copies of the lease agreements, briefly look them over, and file them away. You really need to go through them and input these figures into the City of Oakland form. It's a great, awesome form that they've created, because if you realize that you have banked rents, then that's usually when you can come in and do higher rent increases than the CPI.
To put things in perspective, if you take all those various components and you look at a building like this, and this is why I said earlier it requires more investigation, is that if you can get away with increasing the rents closer to that 26% loss to lease, the difference from what it should be and what you're actually getting, whether it's through tenants moving out on their own or through banked rents, which are currently under moratorium, then by simply being able to raise the rents from $8,547 a month to roughly $11,623 a month, you increase the value about $100,000 to $157,000. So in other words, the value of the property, if I were to buy it at a 6 cap, would now increase from $1,385,000 to $1,542,000, roughly $157,000 of capital gain, unrealized capital gain, just from increasing the net operating income from $59,000 to $92,000 a year.
So this is literally what we do every single day with our clients. And so if you're interested, contact us. We would love to hear from you, simply just on feedback on the show. But if you have a building or you're thinking about buying a building, reach out to us. We can help you. We can guide you and give you our opinion and take on an investment property.
Yeah, and don't forget, our goal is not only to help you analyze these things properly like a smart investor, but it's also to make your laundry experience a lot better. So when you're at home doing your laundry, this is all supposed to make that a lot more relaxing.
And thank you again to East Brother Beer Company for being the show's sponsor. And we will catch you on next week's episode of Keeping It Realty.